My name is Yoki, and I'm on the Vancouver Startup Week team. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are grateful to be virtually gathered here on Indigenous land, regardless of where you are joining us from. I'm grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I'm privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. So first, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for VSW 2021, and welcome to Real Sales Results in a Virtual and Global Economy, hosted by SalesAcademy and the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. This session is part of the VSW Growth Track and is proudly supported by Innovate BC. Innovate BC is a Crown agency that provides small businesses around the province with funding, business coaching, and educational content. They're helping entrepreneurs and founders start and scale their businesses and adapt to the changes brought on by COVID-19. So if you're looking for support for your business, make sure to check out their booth and learn more about how they can help. If you have any questions for our speaker, here, Shane, please post them in the Q&A in Whova, and you can also upvote questions there. Now I'll pass this over to Shane and we'll begin the session.
Thank you very much, Yoki. I'm going to just share my screen here and get a thumbs up that you can see my screen, and I'll start rolling.
Yep, I think we can see your screen perfect.
Fantastic. So we're going to spend the next hour together. My goal is to go over a couple topics that I'm very passionate about. One is, of course, selling, and the other one is in leveraging technology to help us improve our sales, and more importantly, to engage and connect with markets and clients in the global marketplace. If you want to reach me on Twitter or Instagram, you can tweet me or tag me at Shane Gibson. And remember to use the VSW 2021 hashtag so we can find you as well. So let's really drill into how to develop real sales results in a virtual and global economy. So let's talk about where we're at today first. So number one, and these are some stats from McKinsey Company, and they did a recent study with COVID implications for business. And they found that the COVID-19 pandemic has moved almost all sales online, often to self-serve digital platforms. Everyone seems to be happier with the new arrangements. Some 70% of buyers say they prefer digital interactions, and sellers like the greater effectiveness. Video conferences and live chats are helping companies seal the deal. Traditional phone calls are now a last resort for many. And so what was not the norm for us has become the norm. And so it was interesting for me as I've spent the last decade, a little bit of my background. I wrote 2 books on social selling and social media for sales professionals and entrepreneurs over a decade ago. And so I spent the last decade talking about why digital channels are an important addition to your core sales and marketing strategy. And of course, now what's happened over the last 10 years is it's slowly evolved, but all of a sudden we've moved from a nice to have or an important thing to digital being our primary channel for sales in the last year. And consumers and business decision makers don't necessarily want to go back to the way it was before. So what does that growth actually look like? So this is just US e-commerce penetration, the percentage of the population who actually uses e-commerce to shop for products and services. This includes also business buyers. So if we look between 2009 and 2019, we went from roughly about 6% to 16%. And then between 2019 and Q1 2021, we went from that 16% to 36% in a matter of months. And so what we see there is literally 10 years worth of growth in about a year. Now for 2021, there's some good news and some bad news for us as digital sellers or e-commerce marketers, depending upon what you're doing with your business, is that 2021, the expected growth is only about 8 to 10%. So still great growth, but not what we've seen in the last years. What does that mean? So number one, it means that you have literally almost 3 times as many potential customers who are on digital platforms and using digital to make purchasing decisions than you did, let's say 3-4 years ago. But with that said, because the growth has slowed, you also have a lot more competitors, but not the same level of growth, which means it's going to get more competitive to actually get mind share and wallet share of our customers as our competitors become more savvy along with us. So why think global? So one of the big opportunities here, I believe, is that this is not just an opportunity to be virtual, but because we now have these digital and remote selling tools, it actually gives us the opportunity to be global in our thinking and our approach. So this is a stat from Linda McMahon, who's the head of the US Small Business Administration. And she brought this up in a presentation about e-commerce, but it really applies to digital selling as well, or virtual or social selling, is that 96% of all the world's consumers and over 3/4 of the world's purchasing power are outside of the United States. And sort of as an extension of that, North America. So from this perspective, what it really means is that, although selling within Canada or even from Canada to the US is great, there is this massive opportunity, a borderless opportunity from a technological perspective to sell to the whole world. One of the other reasons why we want to think this way as sales professionals and as startup founders is that international competitors are virtually on our turf already. So remote digital and social selling gives us the opportunity to sell the same way to someone halfway around the world as it does to someone who's down the street. So that's a great opportunity for us. And we have to also realize is that international competitors are doing the same thing right now in our backyard. So it is a globally competitive marketplace. You're not just competing with those in your backyard. So virtual sales, I mentioned the term virtual sales. I want to talk a little about what it really is about. So virtual is not just about remote work or working from home doing what we did before. Virtual selling and digital sales is actually about tapping into the power of social networks, digital tools, and technology to improve and reinvent the way we sell. So this is a really important piece, is that it's not just about kind of working remote, it's actually can I use these tools to change and improve the way I sell overall. Even if I do, and I will very shortly, have the choice to go back to selling in person or hopping on a plane and flying halfway around the world for a meeting, how can I leverage digital tools to do this more effectively? So I've also mentioned social selling. And so one of the things I want to do is sort of demystify what this means. Is for me, social selling is simply about talking to customers, prospects, and your community on the internet. And this is a skill set, which of course has become very important in the last year, but will continue to be important as it's now been normalized for buyers, both business to business consumer buyers, to actually connect with us, interact, find information, and make decisions based on what they find about us from social networks and what they get when they engage us on digital and e-commerce platforms. So here's an interesting stat, and this stat is prior to, of course, 2020. So I think this number is probably significantly higher, but this is one of the most recent ones I can find, is that business to business sellers who embrace social selling are 72% more likely to exceed quotas than their peers who don't. So I think this is a really important piece. This is a research done by Forrester Research. And so from this perspective, there really is a good solid argument for getting social. So one of the things I want to share with you now, because I talked a little bit about why and where we're at. So we're in a very remote, globally competitive, digital first sales environment today. And so for us to compete as Canadian startups, Canadian entrepreneurs, Canadian sales professionals, we need to think digital first and social in our sales process. So one of the things to think about though is that things change a little bit when we go online. And so how we engage, interact, develop relationships and rapport with customers, build trust, and then move them into proactive in our sales funnel is a bit different. So this is what I like to call the social sales funnel. And the two big things that drive the social sales funnel are content that we create and share and conversations that we have online. So these are the two sort of two types of fuel that feed our funnel and move people through. So the first step of your social sales funnel is discovery. So I want to kind of introduce this concept first off, is that sales professionals, and I've been in the sales training space for over 20 years. I've spoken on 5 continents around the world over the last 20 years and engaged over 200,000 salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs. And one of the things I find in my travels, no matter where you're at in the world, is that on a one-to-one in real life format, salespeople almost always close too late. They could have asked for the business sooner. They could have done some simple things to accelerate the process easier. And they're often apprehensive. They don't want to come across as too salesy. They want to give their customer time to think about things. They kind of really, in many cases, miss the cues or the opportunities to close the deal too soon. Now, the strange thing is what I've found over the last decade working in the social selling space is that online sellers are the opposite. That almost always I find sales professionals try to close too quickly and skip the key steps of the social sales funnel. So this goes from connecting with me on LinkedIn to the next minute pitching me in the inbox with a cut and paste message that's not been written for me, but a very generic message, and pitches me and wonders why they're only having a 2% success rate on their outreach. And a lot of it is they've missed the actual social sales funnel. So in order to do this as an organization and as an individual, here's some things you got to think about. Number one, it starts off with discovery. So this is where someone discovers you. Maybe they meet you at this event and they see you've attended this conference and they've interacted with you in chat. That's how they could have discovered you. They could have discovered you through a piece of value-added content your company created that you shared on LinkedIn. They could also discover you offline. You could hand each other a business card and talk for 3 minutes and walk away, and then they start consuming your social content. That's the next step online. So they'll consume or read the comments you make, the content you share, the podcasts you create, all of these things, attend the webinars that you host. These are all forms of consumption. So they'll consume our content. So content is required, often from discovery. What makes them stick around is what they consume. Then they interact. And so from this perspective, once they interact, this often happens through a comment, a like, a question, interaction, a conversation, and we begin to have an opportunity here to actually build rapport. Interaction is where we discover they exist. Then there's a connection. So they follow us, we follow them, we connect on LinkedIn, they subscribe to our newsletter, and then from there, they download a white paper and give us permission to talk to them. There's consent. Consent to actually proactively add them to our sales funnel. And that's where the traditional sales process starts. So all of this is driven by great content and value-added conversations, both publicly, like Twitter comments, Facebook comments, LinkedIn comments, as well as privately through direct messaging and tools like chat and email. So this is something you want to really think about when you're putting your online social selling strategy together, is what am I doing at each of these steps to enable the potential customer or client to move towards consent? It's about customer enablement versus sales enablement. So a big one is that your social graph is now your sales credit rating. And what is your social graph? So when I search your first and last name as a company founder or as the chief salesperson for that organization or whoever you might be, what shows up in search? And often, what's the first thing we do when we meet somebody? Whether they email us asking us a question or asking for an appointment, or we interact with someone at an event, we'll often pick up our mobile device and we'll search them. And what do we see? Well, I'll give you an example. So John Ferreira, who's the founder of Nimble, and I had the great opportunity to meet John when he first started Nimble. Nimble is one of the leading CRMs in the marketplace in the small to medium-sized business segment, also a very strong partner with Microsoft. But when I've searched John's first and last name as the founder of that company, he's taken the time to have his team actually develop a Wikipedia entry about him. You see his LinkedIn profile, you see his SaaS Club profile, you see his tweets, and if you drill down further, you'd see his Instagram, his YouTube channel, and a bunch of other platforms that he's active on socially. So what John has done is he's proactively got active on social channels so that when you search for him, you find what he wants you to find and see. Another example is another John Holtby. John Holtby is a sales professional for Citrix, a key account manager. And one of the things you'll see here is he's an individual sales professional, enterprise sales professional, but he too has taken the time to build a LinkedIn profile, to get active on Twitter, to get active with blogging, as well as on YouTube channels and industry portals. And you'll find that once again, when you search for John, you see what he wants you to see, but this is his sales credit rating. If I searched for John and I saw nothing about him on Google or LinkedIn, there'd be a big area of concern for me as a buyer or for someone who's a potential partner, investor, let's say, in your startup. Then, of course, Meena Sandhu, of course, who locally works for Beanworks, of course, is one of Vancouver's, one of Vancouver's local tech stories, success stories. And you'll find that, again, I had to sort of go on 2 screenshots to see that Meena literally owns the top 10 of her name when I search in Google for her first and last name as a sales and organizational leader. And so my question is, when I search you and or your brand, do you truly have a strong social credit rating? Because that's our credibility. Another way of saying it is, if I Googled you Could I find enough evidence to convict you of being a social and digital seller? And that's really important. The answer needs to be yes. So before we go out and start prospecting, we need to have a good storefront or credit rating. And that starts with being discoverable. So being discoverable, there's a few ideas here for you. Is number one, Google Places. So Google Places is number one, is that do you have these nailed down? Have you claimed your Google business profile? Are you actively adding content? Are you asking customers to write reviews on a regular basis? If you have multiple locations, Vancouver, Toronto, New York, even if they're just PO boxes, you can snag a local location. And do you have Google Places for each of those regions, which helps with search results? Are you on platforms relevant to your industry, right? Mina being previously involved, or John Ferreira being involved, of course, in software as a service, is on the SaaS Club portal. And the reason why he's doing this is, A, he's going to be found where people expect him to be, right? It's going to help him build his profile. Search engine optimization is a big one as well, of course. A vital investment, I think, for a business at any stage of growth. And then activated and active on social profiles. It's not just enough to have a LinkedIn or Instagram profile or Twitter profile. We need to be actively creating content on the platforms that our target market is on. Then, of course, and I'll talk about this later on, is in real life networking and events, which I'm looking forward to getting back to. And they're a vital part of your digital and social selling strategy, because really a great sales strategy is a hybrid strategy where it marries offline and online marketing, and they help collaborate and connect communities. So for me, how I make online real is not the number of connections I get or the number of tweets and I have, the number of comments I have for people. Is it gets real when I can take someone I met on LinkedIn and get them on a Zoom call, and even better in a person-to-person meeting if I can do it. And that's where things get real. So in real life networking, once you've met someone once in real life, their content means way more on the internet to you. Guest writing, press releases, capitalizing on trending topics. Social proximity engagement means asking your connections on LinkedIn or Twitter for introductions to people you know that they're connected to. Online events, of course, like this, or hosting your own. And joint venture marketing, partnering with people who don't compete with you, but maybe have a similar target market where you can cross promote each other. So these are all examples of being discoverable. And it is the first step in the social sales funnel. I looked at some interesting statistics from Gartner that came out this year that say the number one challenge that sales professionals and sales organizations are having today is getting the first meeting. And then when we look at their approaches to getting the first meeting, many of them are antiquated or limited. So it's cut and paste kind of spammy approaches on LinkedIn. It's cold calls, but it's not a really fully integrated strategy to be discoverable, and then create some nuanced conversations that allow us to have that first real conversation, whether it's a Zoom call, a phone call, or a face-to-face meeting. So these are some of the things we need to do to be discoverable. And I'll talk about some of the next steps in a moment. And then I am going to get into what I would call traditional sales process. What are some of the things that once you get that lead or that first conversation that you need to have in your business to have an effective sales process? So quick caveat here, under the questions and answers, as I'm going on here a mile a minute for the next few minutes, if you have a question, please pop them into the Q&A section and I will get to them. So from this perspective also, we look at, I used to call the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade and the World Trade Center's events and programs my offline networking. So that was my offline strategy. And then my online was my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my blogging, my podcasting, my proactive cold prospecting. That was what it was. But today, really the Board of Trade, for instance, the World Trade Center, and why I share these, of course, is the board has, was one of the partners that invited me here to speak today. In addition to this, it's also a core important piece for many startups, especially in Vancouver, to grow their business, in my opinion. So I like to call it hybrid networking because they offer both online and offline opportunities to connect with the community, clients, and prospects. So little history for me in the Vancouver Board of Trade. I joined the Vancouver Board of Trade when I was 18 years old. So I joined 27 years ago, hard to believe. So 27 years ago, I joined the Vancouver Board of Trade. And when I joined the board, there was no Leaders of Tomorrow program. There was nothing for young entrepreneurs. I just rocked up, wrote a check for $725, which it's actually less expensive to join today. There's lower tiers in the program. And it was a standard membership. There was no choice. Here's what you got. And I joined the board and I got active and I had 0 clients. I was busy for, literally 3 months. I went out there, networked, I attended all the events I wanted to attend. And I went back to the person that signed me up. His name was Terry Clark. I said, Terry, you told me the board means business, but actually, after 3 months, I've given you all kinds of money for these events. I've got no revenues. I think you're in business, but I'm not. And he kind of laughed and he said, what events did you go to, Shane? You had a lot of events with a lot of other startup founders like yourself, small business people, networking, having some cocktails. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, your prospects aren't there. He says, there are other events at the Board of Trade. There's over at that time, there's, over 100 events a year. And he goes, look at what events your ideal prospects attend. Because they might not be the most exciting events to you, but they're really important to those senior level executives, right? Those organizations that can use your product or service and attend those. And he said, go to the next event, distinguished speaker luncheon, buy yourself a ticket. And when you get there, sit at a table where you know no one, even a table that you feel maybe a little bit intimidating, right? They're a bit older than you, more established in the industry. And I was, of course, 18 and a half years old. Imagine showing up at this event. So I went around a room full of suits and business people. And I sat down on that table and I started having a conversation with them and shared with them what I do. And at that time, I was marketing speakers and consultants. I wasn't doing speaking and consulting. And from that one luncheon, I landed 2 deals. One was a business plan strategy or a strategic planning session that I booked with one client, and one was a speaking gig for one of my speakers. And between those 2 gigs, it paid for 20 years worth of Board of Trade memberships. So why I share this is I talk about using local industry groups, whether it's a Board of Trade or it's a technology industry association, is attend events where your target market is at, but also get involved. So one of the other things that I did is I rolled my sleeves up and joined the Small Business Council and also volunteered at specific events to help out beyond just attending. And that allowed me to meet the key movers and shakers and employees at the board, but also other active entrepreneurs. Connect, don't pitch. So with your offline networking, it's really important. It's not about handing your business card and giving you an elevator pitch. It's more about listening and building rapport and establishing the foundation of a relationship. Stay consistent. So one of the things that I did, and some more advice that I took to heart from the Board of Trade, was it wasn't about being active for 3 months. It was being committed to being part of a community permanently, the Vancouver business community. And by doing that and regularly showing up at events, it built momentum and trust within the community that brought me in referrals. And lastly, look for opportunities to provide help and expertise. So there will be an opportunity to come where you can guest speak at something, where you can roll your sleeves up with a community initiative at the board and really show the power of your business and your expertise. And these things, for me, the Board of Trade has consistently brought me at least every year, at least 50% of all my revenues come directly from Board of Trade referrals or people that originally hired me through the board that referred others to me. So a really strong channel. And the World Trade Center is also another incredible opportunity for those of you that want to export beyond Canadian borders. Board of Trade has a trade accelerator program, as well as the Integrated E-commerce Essentials program, which are 2 fantastic programs that help entrepreneurs prepare themselves to export in a traditional sense or a digital sense around the world. They also give you access, and this often comes through these programs, their export network. So business intelligence, access to government offices, officials, and individuals that can help you. Funding and grants, trade missions, and peer networking are all things that are available to you. So as a Vancouver entrepreneur, I own no commission on this. This is not me pitching for me, although I'm happy the board's invited me here, is that as an entrepreneur, it's probably the single best decision I made in my business was to get involved with the board and also the World Trade Center. So there's a lot of resources available for you at a very reasonable investment for your business, especially if you want to permanently be part of the Vancouver business community and beyond. So think about what your offline strategy is, because if I look through my LinkedIn connections of those people that interact with me the most, one of the things I notice is they're also the people that I've often spent face time in real life with in the community. So let's talk about LinkedIn here. Back to LinkedIn. Someone meets us at an event, we give them their card, or we meet them on the Twitter, which I did just the other day with a new connection, and now we're doing some work together. It's kind of amazing to see how quickly it can happen. But the point is, what they're going to do is when they Google our name, often our LinkedIn profile shows up first. And does your LinkedIn profile read like you're looking for a job or a new customer? So if your LinkedIn profile doesn't talk about how you can help me, the customer, in my business, then you really missed a huge opportunity, because for individual sales professionals, business founders, and anybody in your company, actually, really your LinkedIn profile, when someone hits it, it should be talking about how you help me, the potential customer. So some thoughts of being active on LinkedIn. I don't have a lot of time today to dig into it, of course, because I'm kind of going high level here in the concept of social selling as well as sales process. But some thoughts about getting active. If you're proactively generating business out in the marketplace, I'd highly advise in investing and getting active with LinkedIn's Sales Navigator as a tool. LinkedIn did a study comparing individuals who use Sales Navigator well and those that don't use it so well. And they had some major corporations allow them to directly connect with their CRM and monitor sales professionals' activities on LinkedIn and compare it to their win-lose rate and their sales revenues that they generate. And here's what they found is that social selling leaders, those that are active on a regular basis on LinkedIn, using the tools effectively, create 45% more opportunities than those with a lower kind of score or activity. Social selling leaders are also 51% more likely to reach their quota, and 78% of all social sellers outsell their peers who don't use social media. So one of my suggestions, a good way to start, say, hey, where am I at? And it's a bit of a vanity metric, but the LinkedIn Social Selling Index. So if you Google LinkedIn Social Selling Index, there'll be a URL, you can click on it, and for free, it'll give you a readout from 0 to 100% of where you score as far as LinkedIn effectiveness. Truly, I think that anything over about 30 out of 100 means you're using it to some level of effectiveness. Once you get up into 50, 60 points, it's truly, you're probably going to find you're generating business from it. And beyond that, you kind of have to live on it like I do. But think about LinkedIn as a key strategy. Now, what do you do on there? What's my goal on LinkedIn? So my goal on LinkedIn is a little bit different, maybe than some people would profess to do. So a lot of people use LinkedIn purely just for outbound prospecting. So they got a LinkedIn profile, looks a little bit like a sort of sparse resume, a photo, their latest position, and they're out there pitching people. But I think they miss a bigger opportunity, which is to generate a lot of inbound leads, equity, and brand. So there's really three things that I want to be doing when I'm on any social platform, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And there's really three things I need to do to establish myself as a thought leader in my chosen niche. And for me, a thought leader is truly someone who's a trusted advisor versus a product peddler, someone who's endorsable and referable. So three things you want to think about with your social selling strategy as an individual and as a company is, number one, create and curate relevant content. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but part of it is we need to create and curate relevant content and share it on a regular basis in the platforms we're on. Doesn't mean you have to share content for everyone. It doesn't have to be viral content. It just has to be something that resonates with the core needs, desires, dreams, and goals of your target market, right? So very specific. That's not enough to make us a thought leader or have a really good, solid inbound lead flow coming in off any social media platform. We also need to move from content, and this is where it can be outbound or inbound, is we need to have relevant conversations with our target market. So that's where they interact with our content, or I reach out because they posted something and I've asked them questions and interacted with them. Where I've reached out and directly messaged them and asked them a question, but I'm having relevant conversations. Because social, we talk about social selling, when someone talks about, well, social selling is kind of just digital selling. Well, no, digital selling is using digital tools to improve our sales performance. Social selling is actually two-way communications with the target market. That's why they call it social. It's bidirectional. So we need to have relevant, engaging conversations. And then lastly, building community. And this is, really what Vancouver Startup Week is all about, right? It's about pulling a bunch of like-minded people together with similar dreams, goals, motivations, ambitions, and doing something bigger than a brand, right? And so the Startup Week is really about community building in the startup. You can do this within your own niche. It doesn't have to be an event. It could be something as simple as a poll and a conversation string. It could be a Slack channel, right? It could be offline events, right? Networking opportunities. These are all things that build communities. Could be a fundraiser or not-for-profit initiative that you're getting involved with. So that's the contribution part, but the other part of building community is actually building our network. So literally on a regular basis, expanding the number of connections we have, the right ones. So by doing this, if we got all three of these things happening, then we truly kind of create some momentum and a magnetism where people are drawn in and reach out to us. Someone asked me, what's your, talk to me about your cold calling approach. And I kind of said, you know, I'm pretty good at cold calling, but I don't have to do it very often anymore for my own business. And one of the reasons why is I've invested so heavily over the years in thought leadership as an individual on the platforms that often the business just comes to me through referrals or direct questions or contacts. And this is somewhere that a company founder can be, but an individual sales professional and key account manager can also position themselves as over time. So this is important when you're sharing content on social channels or having conversations, is this 90% connection, context, contribution, and community, and 10% content and commerce or me marketing, things about your brand. And so it's really important that if I'm posting content online or having interactions with potential customers or vendors, that from this perspective is that it's like a good TV show. And this is, again, I don't watch TV anymore where there's commercials, but back in the day when we used to, you'd have to watch 15 minutes of ads to get a 45-minute show in an hour. But no one would watch 45 minutes of ads to see a 15-minute show. And the same thing goes to your social channels. If 90% of your content is about you and your sale and your program, your latest fundraising efforts and whatnot, and only 10% is about how you can help me or how I can improve my business, I'm going to stop following you or interacting with you. And so from this perspective, we really need to have that 90-10 approach. And in our outreach, why I've highlighted context is every outreach, even a cold prospect, when I do reach out with someone on LinkedIn, cold. It's never a generic cut and paste message. I spend a moment using tools like Sales Navigator and my Nimble CRM to learn about them and their business and what's happening and where they've been in the news. And I might even follow them on Instagram and check what they're up to. And when I reach out to them, it's about them. And when they read it, they really know that this wasn't written for everyone by a marketing department. This person really took the time to get to know me, see an opportunity, and customize their outreach. And that is something that's missing in a lot of the modern day prospecting or sales development strategies. This is not enough context. And that's why we're only getting through to 2 to 5% of our audience instead of 30 or 40. So content. I'm going to kind of move through this really quickly here, but I've talked about this already, is you want to know your audience and your micro niches. You want to monitor, listen, and learn. So this is the next step, is before I pitch, I monitor, I listen, and I learn about my market. And then I create and curate content online and offline that fills a need or solves a problem or helps someone achieve a goal. My content and even my conversations have to be about how I'm helping my market achieve a goal. And I'm going to use multiple platforms, profiles, and media to expand the reach. So it's great if I love LinkedIn and I want to do direct sales via phone and an e-commerce site. But if my marketplace loves Amazon and they love to interact via chat, and they're on Twitter all day and Instagram all day, I've got to be where they're at. So it's really important to use multiple platforms and media channels to engage our market where they're at. So people talk about, like, what type of content can I put out as a sales professional or as a business in general? New developments. So important, if I'm going to post something about my book, Rare Results in a Virtual Economy, it better have some type of cool factor, fun factor, something innovative or community focused. No one just wants to hear about a book and how much it is and what its features are. It has to be newsworthy. Your take on industry news. So if you can give insights on the industry, corporate or personal video is a great piece of content to put out. Some people ask me, should it be short or long? And my answer is yes. I believe that we don't have attention deficits out there. We have interest deficits. So you only have about 15 seconds to get someone's interest, and then they'll watch a long video. But it doesn't matter, really from that perspective, how awesome the back minute or 2 or 5 minutes of your video is if you don't get them in the first 15 seconds. So think about that way, whether you're doing short form video or long form video, people don't have a low attention span, they have a low interest span. And so from this perspective, we need to find ways to really speak directly and understand our target market so we can draw them in. Webinars like this, for instance, but also micro content from them. So you can take a webinar like this and you can cut it up into 20, 30 small 30-second segments and then put that out as micro content in the marketplace. You could go and create infographics based upon the information here and repurpose it. You could transcribe the audio and video and turn it into blog posts. These are all ways that you can create and develop content pretty quickly for your social channels. And lastly is even personal storytelling. So sometimes you don't need to blow people's mind and show them how awesome you are if you just tell daily stories about what you're doing in your business. This here was a $6,000 photo I posted on Instagram. So it didn't cost me $6,000 to post, but I've got a number of business connections and potential customers that live in, who are in my target market, who follow me on Instagram and vice versa. And, I post where I'm speaking, and I post where I'm hiking, and I post where I'm camping, and I also post where I show up at events. So I posted my son and I at an event a couple of years ago. I think it was not even a little over a couple of years ago. And I just posted this event, speaking at doing the Trade Accelerator program. And then I had one of my connections who had been watching me on the internet for a while, listening to my podcast. I didn't know this, but they were. And they just asked a quick question and said, hey, so this is, do you do stuff in the financial services industry? That was the question, like right below, because I talked about, I just did a speech that day. And I answered yes in the comments. And, drop me your email and I'll send you a quick link to some of the work I've done. And away I went. And next thing you know, in less than 3 weeks, I found myself in Victoria doing a keynote at a conference for $6,000. And that all happened off a photo I posted. And this is the key factor, is that what you're doing on all your channels is you're visually storytelling about how you can help your target market. And that's one of the most powerful ways for me that I can build inbound leads. What you can do as an organization, and I borrowed this from Mary Aid with HighSpot on her blog, is she gives a really good example of how you might want to organize your content for your sales funnel as well. So these are tools that you can create that enable your sales team to succeed, but they're also customer enablement tools for many times where our customer is going to make 80% of their buying cycle is going to occur before they actually reach out and interact with us through consuming our blog posts, our articles, our social media, our presentations, our white books, our white papers, our ebooks, our webinars, you name it. And then finally, they move into our sales cycle. But the key factor here is we need to have a solid content strategy, digital content that your team can feed to potential customers or that they can find themselves through the sales cycle. So this is the new sales funnel. It is really customer centric, digital first, content and conversation driven. So with that said, now we've got that lead. Let's talk about a great sales process. And I've got roughly about 10 minutes here to maybe 12 to walk through this tail end here, but I'll share a little bit on what I think the ideal sales process looks like. So for me, number one, closing is a process, not an event. A lot of people say, Shane, who do you know is a good closer? I need to hire someone to help me close deals. And my answer is there's no such thing as a good closer, in my opinion. It's someone who does all the previous steps so well that the close looks easy. And that's really what closing is. It's a process, not an event. So part of the importance of sales process for an organization of any size, and these are sort of stats from Harvard Business Review, they found that there was an 18% difference in revenue growth between companies that defined a formal sales process and those that didn't. So actually having your steps, key steps laid out, and the key KPIs or qualitative aspects of those steps on paper in a playbook that your team can follow are vital to our success. So I can't go through every part of a great sales process, but I want to share 3 that you want to think about for your business. Is number 1, quality and consistency of lead flow. So this is the key piece, and I'll talk about this. This comes down to really understanding your market, because you can't develop high quality and consistency of lead flow if we don't truly understand exactly who our target market is and how to really pique that initial interest, right, or conversation. Second is quality and depth of conversations. So are we having high quality, deep, explorative conversations with our potential customers, both online and offline? And then third is quality and tenacity of follow-up. And I'll say about follow-up is, across all the countries I've spoken in and the sales organizations that I've assessed their sales process, I've never once told a sales leader that their salespeople are following up too much. Now, I might say they're boring, they're following up and not adding value, but in most cases, it's both. They're not adding value and they're quitting too soon in most cases. And so quality and tenacity of follow-up, or what we'd call lead nurturing, is really vital for our sales success. So the first part is to know your market. So if I say to someone says, hey, what kind of clients are you looking for, Shane? And I said, well, I'm looking for tech organizations that need sales training. Well, I think there's 180,000 of them across Canada alone. But most of them actually wouldn't be a fit for my skill set, maybe not the right size or geographic location. And in most cases, what I get is for every good lead, I'd probably get 20 or 30 leads that aren't a fit. But that would be my fault. That would be my fault as well if I told a marketing agency, here's the type of leads I would need. I need people who need sales training in the tech space. It wouldn't be anybody's fault but my own that I got, in most cases, poor leads and the odd good one. It goes down to being able to really identify our niche. And so this is an example. Someone said, what kind of clients are you looking for? I'd say, well, SaaS companies, software as a service with 10 or more salespeople in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, or Calgary, who do 20 million more revenues, who sells B2B solutions and products, who's in growing or in transition as a business, and where I can get direct access to key decision makers. For me, that's the CEO or the vice president of sales, to talk about how I can help them. So that now probably goes from 140,000 potential clients to maybe 3,000 potential ones across the country and 300 potential ones in Vancouver. And so from this perspective, what this allows me to do is focus all my prospecting, but also all my content marketing efforts on a specific niche that will give me a true ROI. It also enables me to become an expert in helping this group, which gets me above the noise of my competitors. So the first step I ask is your sales process is, have you defined your target markets this well? And you'll probably have multiple sets of criteria depending upon the region and industry you're going into. But that's the first step. Second one, we talk about great conversations, is 70-30 selling. So there's a misunderstanding out there that great salespeople are great talkers. And in most cases, it's actually the worst thing we can do. A great salesperson is listening 70% of the time and asking great questions and offering great insights 30% of the time. So this is a really important piece, especially those of us who maybe are selling online right now and we're doing demos or talking about our products or our services. Stop delivering generic demos and product pitches, and definitely stop doing it in your first meeting, in my opinion. We want to have a discovery meeting first. We do majority of the listening. We understand their core dreams, motivations, goals, desires, challenges, and business strategies. And then when we sit down with them next, we present a very customized presentation that's going to help them to get them where they're at. And it just happens to be that our solution will get them there. But I think too often what happens is we get people in meetings, we do feature and product dumps, we talk the whole time, and we learn nothing about them, and we're just guessing at what they might be interested in. And we wonder why we're doing demo after demo after demo and not closing the deal. But if I asked you, let's look at your last 5 meetings with potential clients. What are the top 4 priorities for each of these clients in the next year in their business? And what's their top 1 or 2 challenges? Most people can't answer that question because they spent the whole time talking and not asking the right questions. So in order to be really effective in selling, especially if you're remote selling, using the phone or using Zoom or any of those tools, we need to make sure we're listening. In fact, Gong, which is an artificial intelligence-based tool that literally listens to sales conversations and watches sales videos, and it'll tell us through these conversations how often we talk, how often the customer talks, how often we mention price and competitors, and also how much back and forth occur in the conversation. And it connects it with win rates because it's integrated with major CRM tools. So it actually tracks entire sales teams. It'll tell a sales leader who in their team is talking too much or too little, who's talking about price too soon, who's having long monologues. And from that, it's connected win rates. And they did a study of several 100,000 calls. What they found was that sales professionals who listen more than they talk close significantly more deals than those that do most of the talking. So there's some interesting stats. They also found something interesting as well, is that video meetings work. So for those of us that are remotely selling to potential clients, sometime in the sales process, not necessarily your first call, but maybe your second or third meeting, we want to turn that webcam video on and actually have a conversation with people. So they found that for closed won deals, webcams were used 41% more frequently throughout the sales cycle. So kind of topping it off here, know who our ideal target market is the first step in a great sales process. The second one is getting really good at listening and having fantastic video meetings or in-person meetings, of course. And then lastly is follow-up. So it takes between 8 and 12 value-added interactions with a qualified ideal prospect to go from hello to our first transaction in business to business sales. And that can take, depending on our industry or business, anywhere from a month to 6 months to a year of interactions. So in many cases, to land a deal and beat a competitor, it isn't about being the best. Sometimes it's just about a battle of attrition and follow-up. Now, one of the key aspects of this is that if we run our sales process by our emotions, we talk to someone who's not that excited about us, or maybe we have a bad sales day or a bad day in the office, or whatever is happening, we might be less likely to follow up. But if we use our CRM with scheduled tasks on a regular basis and set up a cadence of follow-up with our ideal prospects, it's not automated and generic, but personalized and specific, what we find is that staying consistently connected yields really good results. So it's not just about touching base, though. It's actually about adding real value and displaying uniqueness with every contact. And so from this perspective, really quick story, and I'm going to kind of wrap with this, is that I had a potential client come up to me actually at a Board of Trade meeting. I did a speech at the Vancouver Board of Trade, and a vice president of sales for a major insurance company came up to me. He said, "That was fantastic. My sales team needs to hear this. My sales leaders need to hear this. We've got a lunch and learn next week. Would you please come and present? Send me a quote and let's get you in." So I didn't do any needs analysis. I did no research, no report, and I sent him a quote. So I broke all my own rules. And he emailed me back saying, "Great work if you can get it, but that's way too much money for a lunch and learn. Can't bring you in." Of course, because I hadn't done any selling, I just threw an invoice at him. So that was my fault. So I didn't get the deal. But I called him up because he wouldn't answer my emails. And I said, "Hey," I said, "it seems like we got off to the wrong start." He said, "Well, actually, I'm sure what you do is valuable, but I just couldn't go upstairs this quickly and get approval for the budget." I said, "Would you mind if I stayed in touch and just let you know about upcoming events and anything else I do with the board and information I think that might be helpful to you and your team?" He said, "No, please do stay in touch." So I got permission, and I had a recurring appointment in my calendar every 3 weeks. So I'd reach out and talk to him. So I reached, 3 weeks to go by, and I'd send him a link to my latest podcast on sales leadership, or I'd send him I'd have a couple extra tickets to a Board of Trade event, and I'd invite him and his team member out, or I'd let him know I'm in his area and I could drop by for a coffee. And in most cases, it was no thanks, but no thanks. And this went on for 13 months. And then finally on month 13, after emailing and following up and connecting and sending him my podcast, I got a call from a coworker of his who ran another division, who said that Fred in the commercial insurance division, and the other guy was Dave, and he of course was in the automotive division, said I should give you a call. I need help training 100 of our mobile insurance reps, and you're the guy. And I thought, that's funny, because I didn't think I was the guy at all, because I'd been ignored for a year by Fred. But the reality is my value-added outreach was adding value. It wasn't noise or are you ready to buy? It was helpful stuff. And over a period of time, I gained greater mind share. Now I got an opportunity to work with the other division. That went well. Then the original gentleman hired me. And then the CEO saw the work I was doing, and she asked me to do more work with the team. And it ended up being 18 months of work, paid most of my bills, to be honest, for my business at that time. And it all came from just a commitment to follow up once every 3 weeks. And I added it up one time, and it took me approximately an hour and a half of total effort over a year to do that follow-up. Yet it landed me one of my biggest clients during that period of time. So do you have a process in your business that helps you systematically follow up with your ideal clients while adding value and gaining mind share versus being an irritation, right? So never ever pick up the phone, send an email, or go meet someone unless you know how you're going to add value. So lastly is you need a CRM to tie this all together. So I'm not going to tell you which one to use. I use Nimble CRM. Microsoft Dynamics is a great tool. Salesforce, of course, is a fantastic tool, but use a CRM to track and drive your process. Always know and book your next steps. So there should be no contact in your CRM without some type of next step booked, even if it's a year from now. Always have a next step booked, and run your day proactively by your CRM to execute your sales plan. So that sort of wrap things up for me. And what I want to do is just sort of talk a little bit about the Board of Trade, who of course invited me here, along with Vancouver Startup Week, and a little bit about myself if you want to get to know a bit more about me. So what the Board of Trade has put together, of course, so just quickly, a bit about the Vancouver Board of Trade, more than 100 events annually, got a great member perks program with the organization. Actually, I use their travel perks all the time to book hotels and rental cars, because it's much cheaper than any other platform that I can access. Monthly networking opportunities, and of course, signature programs, which really help build your business capacity, your knowledge and capacity for yourself and your team. So that's with the Board of Trade. If you join today, the Board of Trade is actually extending a 3-month trial access membership, which is something I've never heard the board doing. And so events at a member price, which is a significant discount in many cases, plus $150 credit towards your membership after 3 months if you decide to join. Activation fee waived. And for more information on this, you can simply email membership at boardoftrade.com. Lastly, I want to talk about the World Trade Center because there's a couple opportunities for some free or nearly free or fully sponsored or partially sponsored programs here for you as an entrepreneur. So one of them is the TAP program, the Trade Accelerator program, which is an intensive shirt sleeves rolled up program to help you get your business export ready. So this is a 5-week program, 10 modules. And it's typically, I think I'd have to check, around $5,000 to take the program. And I believe that right now, for a limited number of applicants, they're doing up to a 90% sponsored tuition for you to attend. So you're literally getting 90% off the fee. And that's thanks to some of the major sponsors like the federal government, the Royal Bank of Canada, trade commissioners, you name it. They've gotten together to help Canadian businesses, BC businesses, export. So if that program's of interest to you, the application link will be in my presentation, but also you can simply reach out to Rochelle Flores at World Trade Center Vancouver. Lastly, second to last, is the e-commerce program we're coming up in June. We've got full bursaries if you go to the WTC Vancouver website and use the coupon code WTCComp to attend. And so that's a 2 half-day program on really getting e-commerce export ready. Key steps, we dig right down and develop an e-commerce strategy, and it's actually facilitated by myself. We've got a number of industry leaders in the program as guest speakers as well. And lastly is my book. I mentioned it, Real Results in a Virtual Economy. You can find it on Amazon. And if you want to dig deeper and build your capacity as a social seller, I have a site called the Enterprise Sales Academy, which has a complete library of programs to improve everything from your LinkedIn to your online thought leadership strategy, to even running virtual meetings using tools like Zoom effectively. And there's a 35% coupon code, VSW 2021, you can utilize on that site. And that code is available now and moving forward into the future, even for those of you who may be listening to this after the fact is recording. So preferred CRM. So I got a question here, actually moving to the questions and answers section. So this is a good question. Austin has a question here about CRMs, and his question was, do you have a preferred CRM? So for me, I like Nimble CRM. One of the reasons why I like Nimble CRM is a few things. Number one, it plugs into a lot of other tools on the web really well. So for instance, I also use Drift, which is my chat for my website. So when someone comes in as a new chat on Drift and they give the email address and who they are, that's automatically created as a contact in my CRM. So even that whole conversation ends up in my CRM. It's rather seamless. It's also a great tool because for me, Nimble has this one-click data tool, and it's called Nimble Anywhere. And what it does is literally you mouse over someone's first and last name anywhere on the web, and it'll pull up all the information it has in this database and create a contact with you. In one click, it gets into your CRM. It also tracks all your emails within the CRM. So I can be in Gmail because I use my phone all the time and my desktop, but all that information is captured and under that account, my CRM automatically, as John Ferrero called it, Nimble. Plus it's about $15 US a month for the standard version. And then you can add features. So that for me is, one of my favorite ones. And then a couple other great ones that I've seen that are fully integrated, of course, HubSpot makes a great CRM tool. So does Zoho CRM, is a great small business tool that has some really amazing sort of AI and chat capacity built into it now. And of course, as you move up, Microsoft Dynamics and Salesforce, you can't lose with them, but they're quite an investment. So I think that's just about it for time and questions. And I think I probably want to hand it back to Yoki.
Yeah, well, I think we have time for one more question on Huba. So Ramin asks, what is a good sign that we're adding value towards addressing a prospect's problem and forming a relationship?
I think, of course, obviously the sign for me when I put a piece of content out on a platform, let's say, is actually the interactions in the comments. I mean, that obviously it's a bit of a vanity metric, but it does say if I'm getting engagement, shares, questions, and comments, that for me, and it's specific to that audience, that gives me an idea that I've added value. From this perspective, that's a good, that for me is a big one. So I'm looking for feedback. It's hard because if you put a YouTube video, the one thing you can't see, for instance, is you can see that they viewed it, but you don't know if they laughed or cried when they watched it, right? So you're not sure what type of value you added. So I do look for that digital feedback, the likes, the shares, the comments, how long they watch the video, right? That tells me a fair bit. And if they're curious enough to ask questions, right? That's a big one as well, if they share it. So, one of the things I do is, of course, using Nimble CRM, and HubSpot does the same thing, and Salesforce and Zoho has plugs in, is that when I email somebody, I track it. So I'll see if they've opened that value-added piece of content, and then I'll see all of a sudden that 5 or 6 other people have opened it. And it won't tell me who, but it'll say someone in that company opened it other than the original person for privacy reasons, but at least it tells me they shared my content too. So these are some of the ways I can look to see if it's value added. Also, if they're still following me. If they unfollow me, it means I'm not doing a good job,
Well, thank you so much, Shane. And thank you, Sales Academy and the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade and all the attendees who came to this session.